Number one is to ask for feedback. A lot of people don't want to do that because it can be scary. Maybe they've received feedback in the past and it hurt, but they have to ask for feedback from their leadership. Communicate. There's a desire there to grow and say, I want feedback. Can you give me feedback? Specific feedback from a trusted person in leadership, their worship pastor, their worship director. Take that feedback and ask the Holy Spirit to breathe on it. What remains? What's there? And say, I'm gonna work on that. And go watch yourself on video. Look at your platform presence. Look at your body language, your facial expressions, your dress. Is there anything that's distracting with my platform presence? Are you lacking in musical skills? Then start brushing up. There is free resources everywhere to learn basic theory, learn how to stay on the click, learn about phrasing and dynamics, learn how to count basic measures. Because if you're leading a song, you need to know how to count measures, learning vocal technique so that your pitch is good. I would encourage, get vocal coaching, whether that's online, find a vocal coach and work on your craft. And then the last thing would be character issues. Is there a lack of teachability? Is there a lack of submission? Like, I would check my heart and look at myself and say, is there entitlement in me? Is there pride? Have I shown anything to my leadership that may show that I'm not very teachable? Because that right there is a red flag. The first step is to say, I'm going to be humble myself and go ask for feedback, even though I might not like what they say.
Amber Peairs, welcome to the Churchfront Worship and Tech Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Amber, we've been chatting a little bit about this podcast in development and in preparation for it. And so I've gotten to know some of your passion points and things that you do, but our audience is new to you. So I'd love for you to spend some time introducing who you are, what you do, what you're up to these days.
Thank you. I'd love to. My name is Amber Peairs, and I am from Dallas, Texas, the Lone Star State, and I live there with my husband of 2 years, so I still consider us newlyweds. And I've been in worship ministry for about 30 years. I've done pretty much the whole scope from being recording artist, songwriter, a studio vocalist, a pastor. I've worked with choirs, vocalists, and worship teams. So I'm really grateful for the rich experience that I've had over that 30 years in several different churches of different sizes. And I've also been very active in mission work. And I really have a heart for missions and for the nations, primarily Latin America and Europe. And I've led worship in Spanish there and taught on worship, which is a story for another time because I don't speak Spanish, but the Lord has opened the door and called me to lead worship in Spanish. And I've been on staff at Gateway Church in various roles for the last 18 years. And currently, I had been working with 3 of our campuses, helping to oversee the development of people who are coming onto the team, the involvement process, the evaluations and coaching. But while I was doing that, there's been this stirring in my heart, an apostolic calling to take what I've learned in these last 30 years and take it out to worship teams all over the world who need support, they need encouragement, they need training. So in the fall of 22, I actually felt the Holy Spirit nudging me saying, all right, it's time, you know what to do. And so in February of 2023, last year, I stepped off full-time staff for the first time in 30 years, and I launched The Worship Life, which it's a year old. It's still a baby. And just in that year, we've been to 4 different countries. We've conducted about 20 online and in-person workshops. And this year is kind of a building year, and I'm starting to build some courses. I'm going to release our first online courses, which will be like a worship leading 101 for brand new worship leaders, and also a foundations of worship, just teaching theology of what worship is. So I'm so excited for what God's doing and what he will do as long as I'm just obedient and submitted.
I love it. Super excited to hear about what does the worship life do? Like what, beyond courses, like if somebody were to go look at it right now, what is the encompassing of that business?
The main thing is I love to connect in person with churches. I know there's a lot of online content and we can get that anywhere, but there's something special to actually have someone come into your church, sit with your team, watch your team, observe your team, give them feedback in the moment in real time, and just love on them and encourage them. And that's just my heart. I know that's not always possible, so that's why we do the online as well. But a lot of people these days don't like to travel. They have commitments where they can't travel. And right now, that is what I can do. I can travel full time. I have no commitments that are holding me here. So I can go anywhere. And a lot of times we'll even sow a seed. And if they can't bring me in, we pray about it. We feel like we're supposed to go there, whether that's another country or somewhere in the United States. Then we go and we offer our services to come help consult. I've even worked with some church launches that had no worship team, no worship pastor from the ground up, just to help them with some processes. So because I've worked so exclusively on how to build pipeline processes, how to pastor people through, being on a worship team, that's really my heart, and to help worship teams do that, but also the vocal, technical, musical side. And a lot of that really needs to be done in person. It's a lot more effective in person. So I would say that's really my niche, is going and
Totally.
being there with them, and actually leading with them
Yeah.
and building relationships with them, and then providing support after that.
Yeah. What tell people a little bit, to give people some context if they're unfamiliar with Gateway, which I don't know who's unfamiliar with Gateway, but tell people a little bit about Gateway. What kind of a church is it? What's the size? What was the scope of your work while on staff there, to know kind of what you stepped out of?
We have, we started in about 2001, and it started in a house and then went to a hotel. And from there, fast forward to 2024, we have about 9 campuses, one including, we have one in Wyoming, Jackson Hole, but most of them are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so I've been there from the beginning when we had one campus to now. So I've kind of watched the whole growth there. And we are a non-denominational church. And our pastor, Pastor Robert Morris, has a heart for worship, where worship is one of our main pillars at Gateway. So it's infused in every aspect of the church. So if we have a business meeting, if we have an HR onboarding meeting, there's worship. And I love that, because it's a priority. His presence, God's presence, is a priority. And our pastor has shown an example of that and taught on worship. And so it's very missions oriented as well. We have a heart for Israel. And so it's been a great experience being there, because I actually got to be a regional worship pastor and help our North region, where we had 3 campuses that were fairly close together. When one would launch and needed some help, we would send some of our worship team over there to help them as they were building and growing, before they were able to have evaluations or anything. And so we're a family. We have the same DNA, the same culture, but we all have different personalities. But what's great is when we go to one campus or the other, it still feels like Gateway. You still know we're part of the family. It's one family, one house, but multiple locations. So it's a great, healthy church. The leadership's been very healthy. They treat their employees very well. So I've just been so honored to be a part there. I've learned so much about leadership because they pour into us extremely well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's evident. I mean, if you look at the kind of, at least, watching online, I'm not in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but I've watched some Gateway services, seen some of the stuff online, and there is obviously that priority on worship. Like, it's very evident even watching an online service. So it's really good to connect with you and to kind of hear, it's true of the internals as well. Everything. I love that you just said the HR meeting starts with worship. Like, it's such a unique pillar, but what a good priority to have as part of the church. And today, one of the reasons we connected was because you're starting to add value into the community of worship leaders and churches. And as you've stepped out of the role at Gateway, you've been able to kind of use some of your experience. And so we reached out and kind of had this idea of like, I would love to hear specifically, how you've been coaching these worship teams over the years, and everything from vocals to front of house relationships to, stage presence and experience and things like that. So there's a lot I think that you have from your time on staff at Gateway and from multiple congregations and locations that you've been able to kind of see the scale of what works and what doesn't. So I'm excited to jump in with you today on some of that background. And I'd love to start with kind of the vocal elements there. So one of the things that you do, if I'm not mistaken, is that you come alongside and you kind of help coach some of these vocal leaders, worship pastors. And so first of all, tell people what that looks like when you do that with a church. And then I have a couple kind of piggyback questions from that.
Okay, sure. So we talk a lot about the spiritual aspect. Obviously, that's the foundation, the why behind your worship.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of that, but I think what gets lost as well is some of the practical, technical parts, which are all part of the worship experience. They're all part of stewarding the presence of God.
Yeah.
And so when we want to steward the atmosphere, that includes front of house and production media team. They are part of worship. And that is a concept that I'm seeing that's kind of lost, actually. I've actually had churches that were very shocked to think of the production team as part of worship. Mm-hmm. That was foreign to them. And so I encourage them, y'all are in this together. You are the worship team. It's not just you on the platform singing and playing. It is all of you together who are stewarding the atmosphere and creating an environment where people can experience the presence of God in the best way possible. So what that means as a vocalist, we have to take ownership of our part. And part of that isn't just, I need to sing on pitch and know my words. And it's also collaborating with production and front of house and asking the questions, not waiting to be told or asked, but asking the questions. So we talk about platform presence, which is a really big one because you have, vocalists who come from all kinds of backgrounds. And platform presence can be very personal and it can be a little touchy because you want people to be authentically them, but at the same time expressing outwardly the love they have for Jesus inside and doing that authentically, but also doing it in a way that it's contagious, that you're setting an example to the people that you're leading. And we have people who are shy and people who are they're just not used to expressing that way. And it's going to look different from denomination to denomination, but it still needs to come from a heart that is just expressive to the Lord, because worship is love expressed.
Yeah.
And so it has to be love communicated.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's not worship. We're just playing, we're just singing, and we're missing that component. So I teach a lot on platform presence and mic technique, which I can even get into that a little more if you want me to,
Totally.
But like the mic technique. And when it comes to front of house, the mix is important as well, how to build their mix. And if they're using in-ears, a lot of vocalists don't know how to do that. And so I specifically teach them, I have a chart that helps them with what should be in the front of their mix, what should be in the middle of their mix, and what should be at the back of their mix.
Yeah.
And that is subjective as well, but they're best practices based on things like the bass, like lowering the bass in your mix when you're a vocalist, because that frequency, that low tone can actually mess with your pitch. And a lot of vocalists don't know that. So when we are training them and coaching them, we tell them the bass needs to be very low or cut out completely. And our vocalists know that now. Like you'll see them, they're like, cut the bass. And we have a joke with our bass player that's like, hey, but they understand, like everyone needs to build their mix so that they're set up for success or set up well, because they're going to lead more confidently when they can hear the way they need to hear. And if they muddy up their mix with all those low end frequencies, it's gonna cause pitch issues. So we talk about that. We talk about how they need to make sure they can hear the MD, they can hear the
Yeah.
click, things like that. And I know all the music directors out there are like, "Amen."
That's right. Yeah.
And we talk about the importance of leaving both in ears in for the safety of their hearing, so that the click is and the guide is not bleeding through when you have an ear out.
Yep.
We know we teach them things to do so that they don't have to pull out an ear. And there's things that they can do where that's not necessary. We tell them if you have some house mics or one room mic, or you can pop it a little bit, but not to pull it out. And
Right.
so we teach that. We talk about putting their volume halfway at the halfway mark on their pack so that they have some headroom. And, so being that I've done this for so long and had so many different individuals come through with so many different levels of experience, some of them have never, ever used in-ears. So sometimes I'm learning, oh, okay, we need to back up and even just talk about where to put the volume at your pack.
Yeah.
How to put your pack on, how to put your ears in, how to take care of your ears, keep them both in, things like that. And so those are things that have been they've appreciated it because
Yeah.
they didn't know that. And then we tell them, you need to turn the piano up. That's your pitch reference,
Yeah.
because they don't think about that. And
Right.
then if there's no piano and it's acoustic, then you turn the acoustic up. But piano generally is your pitch reference. So those are some of the things we talk about as far as building their mix.
Yeah, you're really coaching people with like the fundamentals, and it helps that, I mean, this is something that not a lot of people have content out there on right now in just regards to is their fundamental to how to build a good in-ear mix, because I think it comes down to, or it boils down to, whether or not you've got a monitor engineer who's doing it for you and you're making requests of them, or maybe you have a front of house guy who's also running monitors, and that can come with its own challenges and unique approaches there. And then you've also got kind of the personal side, where you might have a personal monitor mixer where you've got knobs off stage and you got to make kind of adjustments in the moment on your own, and you've got to know how to move those knobs and sweep those frequencies to get where your mix is really balanced. So I mean, in majority of circumstances, what's the setup for when you're coaching these folks, like on how to set up their in-ear setup? Are they using a monitor engineer? Are they using personal monitor mixes? Is it front of house? Do they have an app? Like what's the configuration there most of the time?
At Gateway, we always have a monitor engineer, except at a couple of our campuses, we use Clang. So we have the iPad. So we actually have to teach them both ways how to mix their own on an iPad and understand what that looks like with the faders and panning and all that. And then other campuses, we have a monitor engineer. When I go out and travel, it's varied. So a lot of churches that I've gone to, most of them are going to either they have the personal ones or they have the iPad where they're able to adjust it and fix it themselves. That is what I'm seeing the most. And so they need to know what that looks like and find that bass and turn it down. And even we talk about vocals. You don't need every vocal in your mix. A lot of times they think they do to blend, but that's another whole nother thing that I teach is the vocal technique. It's a technique that helps you to be more blendable. So it's the approach in how you're singing that makes you blendable, that you don't have to hear every single vocalist to be blending. You need to hear the worship leader, whoever's leading that song. But we encourage them to do that as well. Here's another one that's big, is when they're sound checking, what we call sandbagging. They are not singing at their full volume. And that causes mix issues for front of house and for everyone else who's trying to adjust their volume based on what you're giving them. And a lot of it I know comes, they're timid or they feel weird singing out. But we have our full band playing, and we do this everywhere we go with full band plays, and you're singing at your full volume, high range and low range, because that lower is going to sound different than when you go up in your high and you're belting, and they need to be able to adjust and get a level for you. So I encourage them, sing at your full volume, because it's also for the front of house engineers. They need to get that EQ and that gain level, and they can't get it if you're singing really softly.
So I'm intrigued by that kind of approach because it's right. Like as somebody who's run sound before, for our band, it is frustrating when the vocalist will just check 1 2, check 1 2, and they're not singing something, so they're not giving you what they're accurately going to be bringing in the moment. What are some ways that you have found helpful to get the singers to give you what you need? From a mix perspective, but also from like a band perspective. Again, everybody else is dialing in their ears too. So how are you, any tips that you have for getting those vocalists to kind of maybe they're not warm yet or whatever, but what are you having them do to give them accurate levels there?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times it does depend on how the church, that team is specifically running that rehearsal. We always suggest that they run full band so that you can hear everything in context. And so while they're running full band, like I'm actually standing there with them, encouraging them to sing in the mic. So what they want to do sometimes is they're trying to find where they are in the song. And that could be a verse, or that could just, they don't know where they're at and they're confused and they're singing the wrong part. We just say, don't worry about that. So the check 1 2 is fine as long as they're singing it. And so what we encourage them to do is say, here's an idea, just sing. Checking 1 2 1 2, checking, this is my mic, checking 1 2. And we have them just sing like that. Tell them to just go all diva on it. And we're standing there kind of encouraging them, like, sing out. And they have fun with it. And they realize they don't feel the pressure that they have to sing where they are in the song, because a lot of times they don't know where they are, because maybe the band is just looping the chorus, or maybe the band is playing through a whole song and they don't know where they're at. And it could be at a low part of the song, and we don't want them to check at that point. So no matter where they are in the song, we just say, you just sing as loud as you can, go up, down, just have fun with it. Like you're at home and you're singing karaoke or whatever, but sing out. And I remind them, go high and go low. Cause a lot of people are like checking 1 2 1 2 1. And I'm like, go up in your biggest belt of the song. And sometimes I have to actually stand up there and encourage them to do that. But our team, they know that now. It is ingrained in them. And so when I go to other churches and I teach the vocalists, like, this is going to save a lot of time. They're not going to have to come back and remix or whoa, they're blasting me out now that we're into the actual rehearsal, or we're in a service and now you've got the adrenaline going and everyone's like, ah.
Because you need headroom, right? You need to gain, like the front of house mix, you have to gain stage correctly to give you enough preamp volume coming in, or enough gain coming in to get the signal hot enough so you can process it. But you've got to have some space for when that moment happens and adrenaline or the spirit's moving and you really lean into the moment and you're giving 15% more than you did in sound check. Well, if you didn't sound check correctly, I mean, it's almost like a vocalist is, not really playing their part in that moment. So, I mean, I love that you brought that up, because it's a teamwork moment. You realize that it's not just about the vocalist and how they feel. The vocalist is serving the front of house engineer in their role.
Right.
And that is as a byproduct, is serving like the broadcast mix, overflow. I mean, all sorts of different destinations probably. And then you're also serving your band members. If your band members are putting their mix at, they have you at a 5, and then in the middle of the service, you decide to ramp it up and they need to turn you down, like, you haven't prepared or allowed them to have a good experience either. Right. So
it distracts them.
Yeah, super distracting. So I just appreciate you bringing that up, and some of the tips there I think that's so freeing, just singing check 1 2, top of your lungs, just laying in, being diva.
Have fun.
Like, it's going to be hilarious. But it's going to be so helpful. Like, it's just, and be the same thing as a drummer when you tell a drummer, hey, can you give me a full kit, please. And they don't necessarily have a spot in the song they're playing, but they've got to give the sound check, right? So a
Exactly.
vocalist is just as much an instrumentalist on the team as anybody else.
Right.
And that often gets lost too.
Mic technique is also crucial. And this
Yes.
is, like you said, how they are a musician as well. A lot of times they're like, well, I'm just a vocalist. No, you're part of a team, and
Yeah.
what you bring is so valuable and important, that we need to be intentional with that. And it's learning proper mic technique. And a
Yeah.
lot of times it's never been taught. So that's part of what we do in coaching is, I observe and I consult the teams on their platform presence, but I also watch their mic technique because it's huge. It can affect front of house as well as their own mix and everyone else's mix. And so I encourage them not to hold this microphone straight out in front of their face like this,
Mhm.
because it's part of the platform presence. It hides their face. It closes them off from the people that they're leading, especially if they're on video.
Yeah.
And they can't see your smile, and it's harder for people to connect if they can't see you. So I just encourage them to keep a light grip on the microphone and hold it at about a 45-degree angle. And also, I see this a lot. They're wrapping their hand up high around the top of the basket, the capsule area of the mic, which we know this affects the sound, or
Yeah.
they hold it way low at the bottom, which can affect, interfere with the antenna and
Yeah.
cause the sound to cut out. So we're not necessarily expecting vocalists to come onto a team and understand all the dynamics of a microphone, but they just need to be taught these basic things. This is why I do an email newsletter on things like this
Mm.
specific. I do training on this. I'm going to be doing videos on this because they don't know what they don't know. And we can't really be frustrated with them if they don't know. So I didn't know before. No one had told me. And so I learned about the mechanics of a microphone, basic, principles to help make this experience the best for front of house and for myself. And so I also encourage them, don't hold the mic off to the side.
Yeah.
It's not going to
Yeah.
project properly. And then a big one is a lot of vocalists, because they don't have proper technique, they pull the mic down when they're going up higher, or they want to be louder. That's how they're adjusting their volume instead of understanding through breath support and proper
Right.
technique how to. Like I keep my mic here most of the time. It might come down just a little bit, but I'm pretty consistent. And it's because I've built muscle memory on how to hold my mic 2 to 3 finger lengths away from my mouth. And when I need to go for a higher note and I need to have some power behind it, I don't have to move that mic.
Right.
I can still control that. And then I don't have the front of house engineer chasing me.
Yep.
Because he doesn't know if I'm going to pull the mic away. And that's just a habit that a lot of vocalists have. And they don't even sometimes realize they have it unless they go back and watch themselves on video.
Well, and it's recognizing too that the volume is coming from the instrument, right? It's not coming from the microphone. Your
Right.
position, it's going to drastically impact how much volume is coming through the system on where you place
Right.
your microphone. But a good vocalist knows how to sing quietly, and a good
Yeah.
vocalist knows how to sing loud. That's not dependent on a microphone, right? So
Right.
mic
Yeah.
technique is, I always kind of think about it as it's working together with the instrument that is your voice. It's not the
Right.
thing that is causing the result. So I think that's a huge, I'm glad you brought that up. And because I don't think a lot of people really think about that. And I think they see it on, shows or whatever, and performances, concert with people moving the mic all the way around. But, in terms of a worship experience, you want the sound to be consistent. So
Yes.
that's a huge, having good mic technique and avoiding some of those common pitfalls. I heard placement, where you hold it, and top or bottom, and positioning, and then
Right.
moving it dynamically. Those are the kind of the pitfalls that people would fall into. Any other kind of big mic issues that you would see with mic technique there?
I would say the opposite. You have like the microphone's either pulled away in a moment, or because they're a little timid, shy, maybe they don't have a lot of experience with the microphone. I see this especially, like even my husband, he's not a singer, but when he has to speak, like a microphone is so foreign to him, like to have that in his hand. And he has it way down here. And singers are the same way. If they're not really used to holding a microphone, they can have it way down here, which means the front of house is having to push that volume up, which can cause feedback and all that. Then the other side is those who eat their microphone, which we don't want that either, with their lips, are touching the microphone and they're eating the microphone. So that, I say, this sounds hilarious, but I did it. I did this and it really helped. But grab a remote or a hairbrush and like practice. Watch yourself, how you're positioning the microphone, and make sure that it's about 2 to 3 finger lengths. And you've kind of got to practice that and get that muscle memory again to unlearn these habits that we have of whether it's singing with a microphone way down here or eating the microphone. And I would say another thing that a lot of people don't think about is learning the fine art of the fake clap.
Oh, interesting.
Because so many people clap, full clap, and they're hitting that microphone and it's booming, booming, booming. And they can't really do anything about that except mute you. Yeah. So then there's the opposite spectrum of if you're just have a really loose clap, that can look a little awkward as well. So we teach them even how to clap during a fast song while you're holding a microphone. And it's just being intentional with the clap, but you're not actually hitting that mic hard. Right. And having that thump sound. So it's finding that happy medium, and the sound person will thank you when you learn that, vocalist. Yeah. But it takes some time, but being aware of, oh, I'm just doing what I do and I'm just clapping, but it's thumping in the house, and we don't want that.
I always thought it was weird because I grew up in a church, and I remember there was probably one or two people who really, I just thought, man, this does not feel genuine. They would be singing, and then in between for their claps, they were like clapping up on their forearm. They were kind of like doing it on the side of their arm. And I thought, just don't clap, or like find a different way to do it, because this just looks weird. It just doesn't feel authentic or genuine. I feel like I know that you're focusing on where you're hitting your arm, and it just makes you look a little out of place and out of sorts. So the fake clap, Churchfront audience, got to take away the fake clap, being intentional about the clap without actually, thumping the mic. And I think it's muscle memory, because I don't sing very often without a guitar in my hand, but I feel like, you'll get there. You practice it enough and kind of intentionally moving your hand in that direction without knocking the mic a bunch. It'll be just like anything else. You'll pick it up pretty quick.
It takes, you have to lean into it though, and do it repetitively and catch yourself. Yep. And it will become muscle memory. And I do it now all the time. And it does feel weird at first. But I know a lot of people they're overcompensating. Yeah. Trying to figure out, well, if I can't do that, then I'll do this. And that looks, like you said, that's even more distracting. So it's learning how to clap normal. Mm-hmm. But you're not putting the force there and hitting that mic. So the little things, but they all matter, because we're trying to limit distractions so that people can worship the Lord in the best way possible. And that is part of our responsibility as priests, as connecting people, and leading those moments, is to limit distractions. Yeah. And sometimes we're the distraction. Yeah. So, and I'm talking to myself. So we've got to be aware of, what are we doing? Look at ourselves on video, watch our mic technique, watch our platform presence. Are we doing anything that's drawing attention to us or distracting? We just ask the Lord to give us revelation on that. He will show us ways and creative ways to fix that, so that we're not that distraction.
Yeah. I want to pick your brain about the vocal team at large. And I would imagine at Gateway, but probably in other campuses and things like that, there's probably quite a few vocalists on stage. Like, how many would you say are on stage at a given time for a weekend?
It's usually anywhere from 4 to 8, depending on the platform size.
Yeah. That's perfect, because I think my question, and I think where a lot of our audience gets hung up, is what do what do all of those vocalists do? How do you coach a team of more than three people with what to do vocally? Because the example I can think of is like the struggling worship leader who's trying to make sure that everybody's singing a part. So they're assigning like, okay, you're going to sing the alto harmony and you're going to sing the soprano harmony. You're going to sing the tenor part, and like everybody's going to be singing all the time, all the parts. And it's just, really focusing on getting that executed. But with a big team, with more and more vocalists, you really, the strategy changes, if I'm understanding correctly. So how do you coach, or how does Gateway handle large teams? What are all those vocalists doing? What do the assignments look like? Fill our audience in on that.
And I would say you could use these principles no matter what size. So even if you had 2 or 3 vocalists, it just needs to be an intentional communication, an intentional process, an intentional approach to making sure that the vocalists are prepared in the best way possible. And so one of the ways we do that is we have a vocal director, and you can do that anywhere with any size group, is to have someone that's very strong with harmonies and parts, someone that's a trusted person that leadership assigns that they're the vocal director, and they kind of help facilitate what's already been communicated prior. So we put it in planning center that this person's doing this part, this person's doing this part, and we use number charts, and we've taught our vocalists how to read numbers. So instead of solfege, which a lot of people in choir are familiar with, do, re, mi, fa, so, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So all of our harmonies are written out with numbers, and we that's how we learn our part. So that the alto here and the alto here, when they're practicing the same part. Then when they come to rehearsal, we're just listening to everything, trying to make sure that everything's right, or if we need to make a little adjustment here, but everyone comes in actually knowing all the parts because they have the number chart and they've learned the numbers. Now that seems pretty like, whoa. And I'm not, saying everyone should learn numbers. I will say all vocalists need to know basic music theory and understand intervals. And you can do that by just learning. Like I said, we can do like learning the 1 and the 4, which is "Here Comes the Bride." Just basic things like that to train your ear on intervals instead of doing everything by ear. This way, if they change keys, or maybe it's male led and then it's changed to female led, we just have a chart that's flipped. And our harmonies, we just read the numbers. And so we establish that beforehand so people can prepare, and we post those charts. Now, if that's not possible, I've seen a lot of churches, we encourage them, have someone sing the part and have some reference of the harmony so that people can listen to that. And we have it assigned ahead of time. And then when we come together, we have a vocal director or someone who's just listening and making sure everything sounds balanced. And then when it comes to co-leaders, if you're one of the vocalists and you're leading a song, then that's a whole other training that we do for co-leaders to teach them how to lead that moment. And even for vocalists who want to be co-leaders, there's a lot that goes into that, and a lot of things to be aware of if that's on your heart to be a co-leader. But we know everyone's role, and we respect that role. And we know the music director's role, vocal director, worship leader, and we know the different chains of communication, and we honor that. And so it's very organized and very intentional and very honoring, which I love. And so I just kind of help churches, no matter what size they are, figure out who are those leaders who can be a vocal director. And also, have you thought about doing a vocal map so that the vocalists know not to sing on verse 1 and chorus 1, to come in on verse 2? These are things that we have posted ahead of time in Planning Center so that we already are familiar with the vocal map and already know when to sing, when not to sing. So our rehearsals are very smooth. During rehearsal, the vocal director is just giving cues like lead, we're singing unison, we're singing parts, we're not singing. And then that way all the vocalists feel prepared and ready to go. And then when the service comes, they're ready and they know what part they're singing and they know when they're singing.
Yeah, that's crucial. And I think what it boils down to is the prep, right? It's the preparation and the resourcing of your team. Because I heard you talk about charts, I heard you talk about signals during rehearsal, and I heard you talk about planning center. And those three things in combination are helping your team show up prepared. They know what they're expected to do. I want to pick your brain on the number chart piece. When you talk about a harmony chart with the numbers on there, are you writing a number over every word, or are you giving like this one sings the third and it's just the third above or whatever? Like how does that practically break down? I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around that.
It's over every word, the syllable. So wherever that note may change. So now, here's a disclaimer. We have a person that's really good with, they're kind of a harmony geek, and that's what they love to do. But you usually can find someone like that. Yep. Or if not in your church, someone who is, but she loves to do it, and that's her gifting. And so she enjoys writing it out and puts the numbers, and, a lot that seems a little tedious. I tell teams, like, it may be very different for your situation. And that's fine. Then have someone record it.
But what a cool strategy option, because I think a lot of people, at least when I learned the numbers, I remember feeling like I had unlocked a new portion of my brain. I was like, this would have helped so many. And I learned the numbers in late high school thinking, and I've been in music theory for most of my life, taking piano, but when I boiled it down to just 1 through 8, and I was like, this is like mathematically syncing in my brain and it making a lot of sense. And it made so many things easier in the future to just use the numbers. And so I feel like I have another, maybe like a third arm almost of like the ability to interpret a musical and a moment because of that, where, there might be some people on your team that, it might be tedious, but what a good strategy you could use if you've got the ear for harmony, if you can do the math on the numbers and you can jot it down for them. It could be a really easy way to teach somebody harmony too, if they're just willing to learn it. I was
going to say, it's if you want to learn harmony, learning intervals and doing like number exercises, you can find those online. That I have those resources too. If you want to reach out to me, I can give those to you. We have the number mountain, and it's like 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5, and all kinds of exercises that help you learn and train your ear for those. That's for someone who wants to learn harmony. These are great. And we have people who came on and they were very intimidated by the vocal chart. It was like a bunch of numbers, but as they have been on the team and they've worked with the chart, they love it. They love it. And like you said, they feel like they have another tool in their tool belt, and it makes them a more effective vocalist.
I love it. That is probably the most common question I get from our audience about where can I find resources to teach my team harmony? Like when it comes to vocals in the church, it's not about their quality or about their timbre, about their tone. It's almost always, I have somebody who wants to sing harmony or who I want them to learn how to sing harmony, and they can't, or I don't know where to point them to. And people feel like they're just born with it, the ability to hear harmonies, but it is a muscle that you can exercise and learn. Like you said, it's interval training, it's listening to music with harmonies in it, it's, recording your parts. And so that is, I think that strategy alone will be worth the weight of the episode today, because I think it will help folks with maybe a new approach to that problem. So thank you for sharing light there.
Of course.
What do you do?
I have an example of the vocal chart as well, if anyone's interested in seeing what that looks like.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We can point them to your site, or you can send me a link and we can put it in the show notes, and all that stuff will be linked below so that folks can get a hold of that stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
I really want to ask you about the maybe the team member who is on the team, singing on the team, but is probably not where they need to be a leader, but they maybe have the desire, or maybe you're just having tension on the team with that. And I'm assuming this probably wasn't a huge problem at Gateway because there's probably systems around this, but I mean, for those churches you're coaching or talking with, like how are you encouraging or handling that relationship when it comes down to assessing quality of those different vocal roles on the team?
Well, so I tell them whether that's at Gateway, because we will have some newer people on the team that want to lead. They want to be entrusted to lead a moment, and we do have a process in place. So when I travel and talk to churches and worship pastors, that can be a pain point. They're like, I have this person and they're not ready yet. What do I do? And they need to be pastored through that process. And I talked to them about it being important that they have the character to sustain that. They also need just the spiritual aspect, but there's also a skill aspect. And so I tell vocalists who want to do this, I say, you can have the greatest voice in the world, but if you can't surrender it for the greater good of the team and the worship experience, then you become a distraction and not a worship leader. And so, whether that's blending or stylistically changing how you sing or doing what's asked of you by leadership, if a vocalist is not teachable and they don't walk in humility, then I might reconsider them for leading. And so I tell a lot of singers, if you want to be entrusted to lead songs and lead moments, and you're not there at that moment, then it's going to be for several reasons, one or several reasons. And a lot of them, they struggle with nerves. That's probably one of the things I've seen the most, even with people who've been in the church a while, been on worship teams a lot. If they've gone to a new place, it's a new environment, they struggle with nerves. Or maybe it's just something they've battled with their whole life, and they haven't gotten victory over that. And I tell them, if you can't get those nerves under control, then it's going to affect your pitch, your vibrato, the shakiness. It's going to affect your confidence to speak clearly and concisely if you're leading that moment. And a lot of times when we're doing vocals, it becomes like a freedom ministry session. There's a lot more underneath the surface. There's maybe some hurt, some offense, something someone said to them about their voice that hasn't really been dealt with. And so it's an opportunity to just love on them and kind of pull that out and kind of walk with them and pastor them through that. And I've seen it help people with their nerves once they've kind of gotten victory over that and gotten healed of some of that. And a lot of times they're not prepared, and they've shown that, whether they come just as a vocalist and they don't know the lyrics, they don't know the arrangement of the song, they're forgetting words, they're not familiar with where the song is going. That can be a train wreck if you're leading and the band is following you. That can be very distracting. And so I tell them that you've got to pay attention to some of these things and be aware that, are you coming to rehearsal prepared? Because if you can't prepare as a background vocalist, they're not going to entrust you to lead the moment if you don't know your words and you don't know the arrangement of the song, or you don't have the confidence that if you're not on a track, you don't have the confidence to communicate to the band where to go next, and they're kind of left like, where are we going? You know?
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, you're speaking to kind of that level of excellence that is a leader, right? On multiple tiers. You're not just a leader on the stage because you're standing on stage, but you're leading the band, you're leading
Right.
yourself, you're leading the congregation, you're leading your other vocalists, verbally, non-verbally, physically, like being confident in that level is a whole
Yeah.
nother tier. And I think level of leadership that really stands out above the rest. You're not crutching on the confidence monitor for every little word that's to come, right? You're
Right.
not you're not confused about the order of the song. You're confident in taking those initiatives and leading to the next spot if you decide to kind of go a different direction if you need to. Like
Right.
that I mean, and we're going to talk about this in another episode with kind of the process of getting people through that development. But where would you encourage somebody to start? Like, what would be some steps for them to take, or how would you encourage them to prepare to kind of be more confident in that role? Like any kind of, quick takeaways that they could, if they're interested in that kind of a confidence level, that they could do, today in their house.
Right. Well, number one is to ask for feedback.
So good.
So a lot of people don't want to do that because it can be scary. Maybe they've received feedback in the past and it hurt. Let's be honest. We've all gotten feedback and it maybe it didn't feel very good, but they have to ask for feedback from their leadership, communicate that there's a desire there to grow, and say, I want feedback. Can you give me feedback, specific feedback from a trusted person in leadership, their worship pastor, their worship director, and then take that feedback and ask the Holy Spirit to breathe on it. And what remains, what's there, and say, I'm gonna work on that, and go watch yourself on video and like look at your platform presence. Look at your body language, your facial expressions, your dress, your clothing. Are there things that are distracting? This is especially for people who may be on a team where there's not a healthy culture of feedback. They're not getting the feedback that they want. Then you also have to take ownership to say, I'm going to go look at myself. I'm going to go watch and invite the Holy Spirit and ask him to show you. Is there anything that's distracting with my platform presence? Are you lacking in musical skills? Then start brushing up. There is free resources everywhere to learn basic theory, learn how to stay on the click, learn about phrasing and dynamics, learn how to count basic measures. Because if you're leading a song, you need to know how to count measures, learning vocal technique so that your pitch is good. One of the number one reasons I hear worship leaders don't, give that responsibility and leadership role to someone to lead a song is their pitch or their tone. So it's vocal technique.
Yeah.
They don't have the strong enough vocal technique. So I would encourage, get vocal coaching, whether that's online, find a vocal coach and work on your craft. And then the last thing would be character issues. Is there a lack of teachability? Is there a lack of submission? Like, I would check my heart and look at myself and say, is there entitlement in me? Is there pride? Have I shown anything to my leadership that may show that I'm not very teachable? Because that right there is a red flag. And so the first step is to say, I'm going to be humble myself and go ask for feedback, even though I might not like what they say. And then ask the Holy Spirit to breathe on it. And when you do that and you lean in and you put the effort in, I've seen it time and time again. Other people would say they are not ready for the platform, but they humbled themselves and they put the work in and they worked on their craft and their character. And now they're worship leaders on platforms, leading boldly and confidently and effectively. And I'm just like, I've seen it work, but you have to be willing to ask for feedback.
Yep. We're going to unpack all of that in terms of how to set up a feedback culture and all that kind of stuff in our follow-up episode. So this is your encouragement. If you're a listener or viewer, subscribe and make sure you stay tuned for part 2, because we're going to unpack, I think we're going to call the episode Processes with a Purpose, or Processes with Purpose, because Amber has such gold to share about that too, as you can already tell. So we want to make sure we honor everybody's time and keep this episode at a good time. So stay tuned for part 2. But Amber, thank you for sharing that insight from your experiences. And I'm excited to dive into kind of the nitty gritty of developing that culture, building these systems so that you have the ability and the environment to implement these strategies that you've talked about today. So thanks so much for sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.